Well, good morning. Welcome to North Point. We're glad you're joining us for our online service. Before we get started, be sure to go and grab something to use for communion here in a little bit. Now, in our faith tradition, we sing songs, and we do it because we're commanded to in the Bible, all throughout the Bible. And these songs can serve several different purposes. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through what? Through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts." And so we know from this verse that one of the reasons we sing is in order to teach and to pass on wisdom. Well, good news, the church has a long history of traditional music that has been passed down from generation to generation. And one very popular song called "Take My Life and Let It Be" has been sung in the church for almost 150 years. It was written in 1874 by Frances Havergal, and we know a lot about her life because she kept letters, memoirs, and one of her sisters actually wrote her biography after her death. So we know a ton about her and the songs that she wrote. Well, "Take My Life and Let It Be" was written after a particular experience that she had, and her response to God out of that circumstance was to say, "Take my life, Lord, and let it be consecrated to thee." So set aside, take my life and let it be set aside for your will and your service. And all of the verses in the song are take my something, take my hands, take my feet, take my will, take my voice. And so this entire song is this prayer of devotion. Well, there's a story about one of the verses in the song that years later, after she'd written it, she writes a letter to a friend and says, "God has shown me a new way to serve him and to be obedient to him," related to this line. And the line says, "Take my silver and my gold, not a mite would I withhold." And she writes that God has laid it on her heart to send many of her very nice and expensive things to the church mission to support this missionary and charitable organization. And she writes specifically that it includes this jewel-encrusted chest that she says is fit for a countess. So she was a wealthy woman. She had a lot of resources, and God laid it on her heart that what she needed to do was give those up. And she writes that she has never packed a box with so much excitement, that it was just the best thing for her to be able to pack up all these things and give them away. And so these are the kind of things, this is the kind of sentiment that has been passed down to us and sung and reaffirmed from generation to generation. And when we sing these songs, they aren't just words or a tune, they're a history of the church, and not just of people, but of what God has done in the church and is doing in the church. So today, while we listen to this song, I encourage you to let those words sink in and not just listen, but join in with what God is doing.
Now, I need to confess to you, I am not a fisherman. It's not like I'm an average fisherman or I'm an okay fisherman. I am not. I don't fish. And so I don't really know a great deal about it. But I know there's this famous story in the Bible about fishing, and I know the connection between the early disciples and fishing and so on and so forth. So I want to look at it today because we need to listen to the red letters again. Story is in Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 to 20. It says, "And Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, and he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. 'Come, follow me,' Jesus said, 'and I will send you out to fish for people.' At once they left their nets and followed him." At first look on this, you can kind of draw some conclusions. There's a little kid song that that I sang when I was just a child, and my kids sang when they were children in the children's program, and I'm guessing they probably still do. And some places it says, "I will make you fishers of men if you follow me." And it got me thinking about this passage and wondering if I really understood what was going on, what these words of Jesus really meant. It seems like when you look at it just on the surface that Jesus is saying that these early disciples, his followers, would fish for people because they knew something about fishing. But I'm not so sure they saw the same picture that we see nearly 2,000 years later. It seems just a little too convenient for me. You know, for me, growing up in church, I was taught that fishing for men was our chief calling in life as followers of Jesus. Our lives were all about seeking and finding the lost, sharing our faith. We called that evangelism. I grew up in what was called an evangelistic style church. And the picture that we have in this story is about defining a kind of a methodology of how we are to spend our lives. Serious followers of Jesus go out and fish for men. At least that's what I thought when I was younger. And after all of these years of singing that little song and hearing the story, I got to admit to you, I've got at least a little bit of a problem with this, maybe a big problem. The similarity of fishing for fish and fishing for men is not quite what it appears. So bear with me for just a minute or two. I don't know much about fishing, but I know enough. I know enough to make these kinds of observations. Fishing for men, whatever it would happen to be, is not a science, it's not a method, it's not a sport. It's got to be something else. When I think about fishing, fishing is not rescuing fish. Fishing is for devouring fish. You catch fish against their will. Honestly, if we could carry on a conversation with fish, my guess is that they would be terrified to know what it was that we as fishermen were planning to do and why we actually wanted to catch them. Fishing is all about taking fish out of the safety of their homes, out of the safety of their environment, Even this whole concept of catch and release falls really short of this picture that at least I have been painted for me over the course of my life. You know, in the catch and release, you throw the little ones back in, but you keep the big ones for dinner. Look, when it comes to fishing, think about this. The Word of God is not bait, nor is friendship bait. There are some churches that I think have been rightfully accused, not wrongly, but rightfully accused of being bait and switch churches. It's like, we'll give you free Christmas presents during the holiday season. All you've got to do is come to church during a Sunday morning service and pick them up. That is bait and switch. You're either going to give people Christmas gifts or you're not. You don't need to have them do something to get caught in order to receive their present. The truth is, unlike real fishing, followers of Jesus are not to be about outsmarting or outfoxing or trapping or cornering or pulling people in and catching them against their will. Now, I think this picture that we've had presented to us about fishing for men has something seriously wrong with it, because I think there's something entirely different going on. At least that's what I think personally. When Jesus said that we would be fishers of men, those early disciples, I think they knew instinctively that Jesus was talking about their lives. They knew right away what he was talking about because they were fishermen. Being fishermen defined the kind of people that they were. And I think they knew something right away, that this invitation to be fishers of men was going to cost them everything, because fishing was everything to them. Fishing was their income. It was their security. It was their identity. It was their provision. It was their vocation. It was their occupation. It was how they spent their time from morning till evening. And when they heard the words, "Come, follow me," they knew Jesus meant business. The invitation to become fishers of men was simply the invitation to come and follow. The invitation was not to fishing. It was to following. It was no longer about following the family business or following the money or following their hearts. It was all about following Jesus. He was literally calling them to follow in his footsteps, to walk behind him, to travel with him, to leave behind their safety and security. They understood to follow meant walking behind, literally like a mother duck and ducklings, learning and listening and going and watching right behind the master. Today, I think the call to follow Jesus, when we hear the words, "Come, follow me," I think those words remain the same. But honestly, before it means picking up and leaving and moving and traveling somewhere that we sense God is calling us to, which honestly He might, if we decide to take the invitation to follow seriously. Before picking up and leaving, come follow me is first about heart and direction, and priorities, and choices that we make right now in the moment. To follow Jesus is and always has been about letting His words and His example shape us and guide us. Come follow me means to live as fishermen, as those who have had our lives radically reformed, our wills reshaped, our thinking reshaped, our hearts reformed. What is going to mean the most to us? Following, it's about having the heart and desires of God mean to us what fishing meant to them. Everything. It's the call to see and respond to people with the same kind of compassion and the same kind of understanding that Jesus did, that the disciples did following Him, and that we are called as we follow their example as well. So as we come to the Lord's Supper today, make no mistake. To follow Jesus is to love people deeply, to love people recklessly, not as fish that need to be caught, but as people who are just like you and me, people in need of hope and healing and meaning and belonging, people who need the breath of real life breathed into them. Don't forget, as we participate in the real presence of Jesus through the bread and through the juice of communion, don't ever forget that He is calling us today, just as He called the very first disciples along the bank of the Sea of Galilee 2,000 years ago, to come and follow Him. And that path of following Him always leads us to people. Remember that as you come to the table today.
Life is full of light and shadow, oh the joy and oh the sorrow, oh the sorrow. Yet we'll give way dark to light, yet we'll give way day from night.
So it is really hard to believe that here in Texas, we are down to our last few weeks of summer break. And we are just now hitting 100-degree temperatures. Amazing. We have had such a mild season, but it sure feels like it is getting ready to hit with a vengeance. And it's going to hit and is hitting just in time for our vacation Bible school, or as we like to call it, welcome to the concrete jungle, because we do it all outside. So wherever you are, wherever you're watching from, remember us this week here at North Point in Lewisville, Texas, as we share in the privilege of telling kids about the good news that they can experience when they meet and follow Jesus. It is an amazing calling. It is the joy of our existence as a church family to tell others that kind of good news. So as you go, listen carefully for his voice and don't be afraid to follow his leading. He will never, ever disappoint you. So until next time, see ya.